I made it a goal to make a video every day during the summer because I started during the summer. Let me do it every day sort of goal. That's a really complicated job. And I just saw that it made a lot of money.
Emma Chamberlain was the internet's communal best friend until she realized the rent for that title was her soul. Everyone says it's just tragic because they watched a girl monetize her own mental health until the girl and the brand became indistinguishable. Now, the chaotic vlogs are dead, replaced by the sterile, high-fashion silence of a woman who won the game but lost her anonymity. It's the ultimate cautionary tale. What happens when you get everything you ever wanted, and it's just quiet? Where did the noise go, Emma? The high school dropout's gambit. In 2017, the YouTube landscape was a neon-soaked hellscape of clickbait, oversaturated thumbnails, and creators who acted like they were on a permanent sugar high. Then came Emma. She didn't enter the room. She slumped into it, bags under her eyes, wearing a hoodie that looked like it hadn't seen a washing machine in weeks. This was the birth of the anti-influencer. Emma Chamberlain didn't just change the way we watched videos, she changed the way we felt about being losers. At 16, suffering from a depressive episode so thick she had to leave her high school, Emma turned to a camera because she had nothing else left. She wasn't seeking fame, she was seeking a pulse. The tragedy began here, though we didn't see it yet. Her editing style, the erratic zooms, the distorted audio, the self-deprecating text on screen was a revolution. It was the visual language of anxiety, and it resonated with a generation that was tired of the perfection sold by the previous wave of creators. She made being ugly and weird a commodity. For the first time, a creator wasn't a celebrity on a pedestal. She was the girl sitting next to you in biology class who was secretly crying in the bathroom. We felt like we were in on a secret, but the secret was that Emma was using the internet as a life raft for her clinical depression. And we were all cheering for her to keep paddling, unaware that the raft was taking her further and further away from a normal life. Dropping out of high school is often framed in the influencer world as a girl boss move, a rejection of the system to chase the dream. For Emma, it was a survival tactic. She has since been incredibly candid about the fact that she simply couldn't function in a traditional classroom setting. The irony? By escaping the pressure of high school, she walked directly into a global magnifying glass. She traded a hallway of 300 teenagers for a digital stadium of millions. In those early vlogs, you can see the light in her eyes, but you can also see the frantic energy of someone who is realizing that her vulnerability is her greatest selling point. The trap was set early. Because she was so relatable, the audience felt they owned her. If she wasn't relatable, she was fake. This created a psychic debt she could never truly repay. How do you stay the broke, relatable teen when you're suddenly making more money than your parents? How do you stay honest when your honesty becomes a brand identity? Fast forward to May 2024. Emma posted a photo of herself in a cap and gown, finally holding her high school diploma at age 23. It was a poignant, quiet moment that felt like a glitch in the simulation. For 7 years, she had been the most successful dropout on the planet, a mogul before she was legally allowed to drink. That diploma was more than just a piece of paper. It was a desperate attempt to reclaim a milestone she had sacrificed at the altar of the algorithm. It was the closing of a chapter that should have happened years ago, a reminder that while she was busy building an empire, she was also just a kid who missed out on being a kid. We weren't just watching a star rise, we were watching a childhood get liquidated for views. Everyone, as long as they can relate to her, loved her, adored her. Success came fast, but it brought a shadow that wasn't part of the brand deal. Chronic loneliness. This is the realization that the air is too thin at the top. The tragedy of Emma Chamberlain is perhaps most palpable in the silence of her current life. We are witnessing a transition from a girl who was the life of the party to a woman who has built a fortress around her solitude. Emma's chronic loneliness isn't just a byproduct of fame, it's the price she paid for being the internet's emotional surrogate. For years, her podcast, Anything Goes, has served as her primary confession booth. It's where the cool girl mask slips and the ghost in the machine emerges.
Fortunate that it gets to be a passion project because right now my podcast has become sort of my what I would say is my traditional like job.
In late 2024 and early 2025, Emma released a series of episodes that felt less like content and more like a distress signal. She discussed meltdowns that didn't involve glamorous crying in a designer outfit, but rather the raw, ugly reality of self-sabotage, instances of throwing phones at walls, screaming into pillows, and the paralyzing fear that she has become a hollow shell of the person she used to be. She isn't just lonely, she's isolated by the very platform that was supposed to connect her to the world. There is a crushing irony in her current living situation. Emma lives in a $4 million of architectural masterpiece in Beverly Hills, a home that has been featured in Architectural Digest for its impeccable taste and soulful vibes. But as she describes it on her podcast, that house often feels like a gilded cage. She sits in rooms designed for hosting, yet she frequently admits to having nobody to talk to but a microphone. The parasocial relationship, where millions of us feel we know her intimately while she knows none of us, has created a psychic vacuum. When you have 30 million people who feel entitled to your friendship, the prospect of making a real friend becomes terrifying. How do you trust a stranger when you are a walking, talking currency? This loneliness is compounded by her departure from the traditional YouTube format. In her earlier years, Emma's life was populated by the Sister Squad and a rotating cast of LA influencers. Whether those friendships were organic or strategic is irrelevant. She was part of a tribe. Today, that tribe is gone. She has pivoted away from the influencer scene, opting instead for a life of high-fashion events and business meetings. While this move is objectively healthier and more mature, it has left her in a social no-man's land. She is too famous for her old peers, and perhaps too internet-born for the old money elite she now rubs elbows with at the Met Gala. In a particularly poignant episode titled "What My Meltdowns Have Shown Me," Emma touched on the concept of identity death. She realized that for years her self-worth was entirely tethered to how much of herself she could give away. When she stopped giving, she didn't know who was left. The loneliness she feels now is the sound of her trying to meet herself for the first time without an audience watching. It's a quiet, heavy sadness that resonates with anyone who has ever achieved a goal only to find out that the goalpost was a mirage. Furthermore, Emma's relationship with her audience has shifted from friendship to observation. She no longer speaks to us, she speaks at us from a distance. This is a survival mechanism. She has admitted that the more she shared, the more she felt she was disappearing. By retreating into a life of near-total seclusion, interrupted only by highly curated professional appearances, she is trying to save what's left of her spirit. But in doing so, she has become a ghost in her own narrative. She is the most watched person in the digital room, yet she remains essentially invisible. The devastation here is that the very thing that made her successful, her willingness to be lonely and sad in front of a camera, is the thing that ensured she would be lonely and sad in real life. She became a martyr for the relatable brand, and now she's living in the aftermath of that sacrifice. She has all the coffee, all the clothes, and all the accolades, but she is still the girl in the kitchen, waiting for the hum of the espresso machine to drown out the silence. She realized the only way to keep her mind was to hide her life. The death of the vlog. In the early days, Emma's bedroom was a character. We knew the posters on her walls, the messy sheets, and the exact angle of her vanity mirror. It was an invitation into a private sanctuary. But in 2026, the misery of her content evolution isn't just about a change in aesthetic. It's about a loss of safety. The safety tax is the literal price Emma has paid for her transparency, and it has fundamentally murdered the version of her that her fans loved most. The pivot away from vlogging wasn't a creative whim, it was a security mandate. Between 2023 and 2025, Emma faced a series of high-profile stalking incidents that turned her life into a psychological thriller. Fans had become so obsessed with finding the real Emma that they began decoding the reflections in her windows and the street signs in the background of her grocery hauls. When a stalker finally breached that perimeter, the door to her private life didn't just close, it was deadbolted. This is where the vlog-style content officially died. You can't be relatable when you have to hire a security detail to walk to a neighborhood coffee shop. You can't show your day in the life when showing your front door puts your life at risk. This forced Emma into a digital fortress. Her YouTube channel transitioned from raw, handheld footage to a cinematic or silent film style. Sweeping shots of European landscapes, artistic montages, and voiceovers that feel more like poetry than conversation. It's beautiful, yes, but it's also a shield. It's a way to fulfill a contract with her audience without giving them a GPS coordinate to her soul. The sadness lies in the loss of the normal grocery store run. Emma has spoken about the crushing reality of losing her anonymity. For a girl whose entire brand was built on the mundane, the Target runs, the driving around aimlessly, losing the right to exist in a public space without fear is a profound trauma. She can no longer go to a pharmacy to buy tampons or a gas station for a snack without it becoming a documented event. The safety tax means she has to live in a bubble, and while that bubble is made of high-grade glass and tucked away in the hills, it's still a bubble. Her recent content reflects this seclusion. When she does film, it is often in highly controlled, safe environments, hotel rooms, closed sets, or anonymous nature trails.
One thing that I think differs from Emma to a lot of other YouTubers is she doesn't really give in to clickbait, and if she does, it's more in an obviously ironic way. She doesn't really do anything to really grab views.
The fans complain that she feels detached, but they fail to realize that detachment is her only defense. Every time she holds up a camera, she has to perform a mental scan. Is there a house number visible? Is that a recognizable landmark? The pattern of the modern mega-influencer is that the more people love you, the more dangerous the world becomes. Emma didn't stop vlogging because she got too big for us. She stopped because the cost of being real was her physical and mental safety. She traded intimacy for an ironclad security detail, and frankly, she didn't have a choice. When your home address becomes a public landmark, you stop opening the windows. And then, Emma had another big break. The Met Gala era. In 2021, Emma Chamberlain stepped onto the Met Gala carpet for the first time in custom Louis Vuitton, looking like a deer in high-fashion headlights. Fast forward to May 2026, and the narrative has shifted from the YouTuber who got invited to the woman the event can't function without. The issue frequently cited by her fans, that she has become an unapproachable, high-fashion doll, is actually a masterful pivot into a world where she is respected for her eye, not just her personality. At the most recent 2026 Met Gala, themed Fashion is Art, Emma delivered what critics are calling her magnum opus. She wore a custom Mugler turtleneck gown, created in collaboration with creative director Miguel Castro Freitas and artist Anna Deller Yee. This wasn't just a dress, it was a literal canvas. The garment was hand-painted using traditional fine art materials, not fashion paints, and took over 40 hours of labor and 4 days of drying time to complete. With brushstrokes mimicking the expressive textures of Van Gogh and Munch, Emma didn't just wear art, she became it. She even paid tribute to her father, a watercolor and oil painter, citing her upbringing in an artistic household as the inspiration for her blank canvas approach to the evening. But the shift goes deeper than the clothes. Emma has evolved into the official voice of the red carpet. In 2026, she once again served as the Vogue red carpet correspondent, conducting a marathon of interviews with everyone from Sam Smith to Kendall Jenner. While fans miss the chaotic Emma, who would eat gas station pickles on camera, the fashion industry has embraced the professional Emma, who can hold a poised, witty conversation with the most powerful people in the world. She has traded the relatable teen persona for a seat at the table of the global elite. This metamorphosis serves as a strategic shield. High fashion is, by nature, exclusionary and armor-like. By draping herself in Mugler, Cartier, and Louis Vuitton, Emma creates a physical and metaphorical barrier between her true self and the public. In her early vlogs, her armor was a thrifted hoodie. Now, it's a 40-hour hand-painted masterpiece. This shift is sad to those who wanted her to stay stuck in a loop of 2018 nostalgia, but it's a survival tactic. In the high fashion world, you are judged by your silhouette and your taste, not by your mental state or your morning routine. Her 2026 appearance, complete with a signature platinum pixie cut and watercolor nails that matched the gown's primary colors, cemented her status as a style icon. However, the internet remains divided. On platforms like Reddit, the big change discourse continues, with fans arguing that her makeup looks tired or haunted, not realizing that the corpse bride aesthetic is an intentional nod to the grueling nature of being a public-facing art piece. She isn't trying to look like the girl next door anymore. She's trying to look like a statue in a museum. The problem isn't that she's changed, it's the refusal of the collective to let her. We want her to be the girl who's just like us, but she's currently wearing a dress that belongs in the Louvre. By embracing the Met Gala as her primary stage, Emma has signaled that the bedroom vlogger version of herself is officially in the archives. She has successfully navigated the transition from digital influencer to a mainstay of the cultural elite, proving that you can survive the internet's obsession by becoming something far more untouchable, a legend. She traded the scrunchie for a tiara, and the fans haven't forgiven her for it. The coffee empire. In the influencer economy, most brands are essentially just expensive merch, fleeting cash grabs designed to capitalize on a peak in the algorithm. But Emma Chamberlain didn't just launch a brand, she engineered an exit strategy. Chamberlain Coffee is the structural skeleton of her evolution, serving as the vehicle that allows her to be a mogul, even when she is too psychologically exhausted to be a personality. By 2026, the brand has transcended its cute animal logo origins to become a legitimate, high-stakes retail juggernaut. The most seismic shift occurred in late 2024, when Emma officially assumed the title of co-CEO alongside industry veteran Gustav Hossi. This wasn't a vanity play. After years of acting as the chief creative officer, the vibe curator, Emma stepped into the operational trenches.
I went to Walmart and I was somehow able to find the new Chamberlain coffee canned cold brew lattes. To be honest, I just bought it because I love Chamberlain coffee.
The company had hit the classic growing pains of a viral startup, moving from a simple direct-to-consumer (DTC) model to being stocked in over 12,000 retail locations, including Target, Walmart, and Whole Foods. Emma's decision to co-run the company was a declaration of war against the influencer label. She was no longer willing to be the puppet for venture capitalists. She wanted her hands on the levers of the supply chain. Financially, the pivot has been aggressive. After a strong 2024 with $22 million in revenue, the brand aggressively scaled, hitting a projected $33 million by the end of 2025. This growth was fueled by a massive push into the ready-to-drink (RTD) market, putting her canned lattes in every gas station fridge across America. But the crown jewel of the empire arrived in February 2025, the opening of the first permanent Chamberlain Coffee Cafe in Westfield Century City, Los Angeles. This wasn't just a coffee shop, it was a physical manifestation of her survival. The opening saw lines stretching around the block for hours, with fans waiting for a strawberry matcha, as if it were a holy relic. By early 2026, the strategy shifted toward Chamberlain Corner kiosks in airports and boutique hotels, positioning the brand as a blue bottle for Gen Z. However, the bad narrative persists even within the beans. Critics argue that as the business scales, it loses the handmade intimacy that made it special. There is a visible tension between Emma the artist and Emma the executive. To ensure the brand's longevity, she has had to intentionally decouple her face from the product. You see less of Emma in the marketing and more of a curated lifestyle, vibrant colors, playful mascots, and a focus on ethically sourced beans. This is a cold, calculated survival tactic. If the brand depends entirely on her mental health and daily vlogs, it is fragile. If it becomes a standalone coffee giant, it is invincible. She is essentially selling a way to wake up to a generation that feels perpetually burnt out. She has successfully transitioned from selling her day to selling the caffeine that gets us through ours. By moving into the boardroom, she has secured a future where she doesn't have to film a single second of her life to remain a millionaire. The coffee empire isn't just a business. It's the wall she built to keep the world away from her front door. She is no longer just the girl drinking the coffee. She's the one who owns the pot, the beans, and the chair you're sitting in. She's no longer selling her day. She's selling the beans that get you through yours. The Hollywood leap. For nearly a decade, the question wasn't if Emma Chamberlain would act, but when she would finally stop being forced to play herself. In March 2026, that question was answered with the release of Forbidden Fruits, a horror comedy that serves as her official cinematic debut. Premiering at SXSW to electric reviews, the film marks the ultimate transition in her tragic narrative, moving from the raw vulnerability of the unscripted world to the controlled, protected artifice of the silver screen. Directed by Meredith Allaway and starring alongside heavy hitters like Lily Reinhart and Lola Tung, Forbidden Fruits is a biting satirical look at female friendships and the psychological rot of aesthetic culture. Emma plays a character named Pickle, a role that allows her to weaponize her signature dry, dark wit without the burden of it being Emma from YouTube. For her, acting is the ultimate relief. On YouTube, the character is her soul, and the audience demands 100% authenticity at all times. In film, the character is a script, and the audience demands a performance. It is a much safer, much more professional way to be seen without being exposed. The film explores fashion as armor, a theme that perfectly mirrors Emma's real-life evolution. Working with a cast of professional actors, Emma has spoken on her podcast about the creative rebirth she felt on set. It was the first time in 10 years she wasn't the director, the cameraman, the editor, and the star all at once. She was able to be a part of a collective, a cog in a larger artistic machine, which significantly dampened the chronic loneliness that had defined her early 20s. By inhabiting someone else's skin, she finally found a way to be public without being vulnerable. This move into Hollywood is the final nail in the coffin of the relatable vlogger era. You can't be the girl next door when you're sharing scenes with Gabrielle Union and being directed by indie darlings. But for Emma, it's a necessary graduation. The reality of her internet fame was that it forced her to be a stagnant, 17-year-old version of herself forever. Hollywood offers her the chance to be 1,000 different people, effectively hiding her true self in plain sight. She's finally off the clock, and for the first time, she's following a script she didn't have to write herself. We want the girl in the car, but she's already moved on to the silver screen. The Tastemaker's Decree. If you want to know what the youth will be wearing, eating, or thinking, 6 months from now, you don't look at the runway. You listen to Emma's January 1st podcast. Her ins and outs list has become the digital equivalent of the 10 Commandments for Gen Z. By 2026, her influence has reached a point where a single mention of an obscure hobby, like paint by numbers, can cause an international shortage of art supplies. Emma's 2026 predictions leaned heavily into what she calls delicate preppy. She officially declared that the era of loud street fashion is dead, replaced by dark, raw denim, rose patterns, and most controversially, toe rings and anklets. But her influence isn't just about clothes. It's about lifestyle curation. She has advocated for detachment as a dating strategy and knowing when to quit as a career move. This is the issue shifting into a philosophy. She's taking her personal struggles with fame and distilling them into advice on how to live a quiet, intentional life. When Emma says Snapchat is out or cardigans are in, she isn't just talking about trends. She's defining the social boundaries of an entire generation. But what happens when the trendsetter decides to change the very walls she lives in? Home as a living brand. In April 2026, Emma released an updated tour of her Los Angeles home with Architectural Digest, and it served as a visual eulogy for her younger self. Gone are the quirky, random decor pieces of her 20s. The 2026 house is a masterclass in modern colonial and high-end vintage. Her home has become her most successful content piece because it is the only place where she is fully in control. Fans analyzed every vintage flea market find and every piece from her West Elm collaboration as if they were ancient runes. The house is a fortress, but it's also a showroom. It represents the story of success. She has built a world so beautiful that she never has to leave it. This interior life is her new brand. She has traded the chaos of the outside world for the curated peace of a perfectly placed brass vase. For Emma, the ultimate luxury in 2026 isn't a fast car or a loud party. It's the ability to be alone in a room that looks exactly the way she feels. Sophisticated, quiet, and just a little bit haunted by the girl she used to be. She isn't sad, she's just finally, blissfully off the clock. The beautiful survival. Big question, is Emma done? Is she finally ghosting her fandom and the very fans that supported her? The headline of Emma Chamberlain is, in the end, a misnomer. It is a narrative constructed by a public that feels entitled to the permanent childhood of its idols. We call it sad because we lost our best friend. But for Emma, the transition from the frantic handheld chaos of 2017 to the curated silent power of 2026 is a success story of the highest order. It is the story of a girl who realized that being relatable was a death trap and had the audacity to stop being accessible. We have spent nearly a decade watching her grow up in a fishbowl, and the real tragedy would have been if she never changed. If Emma were still sitting in her car, burping on camera, and crying over boys for the entertainment of millions at 25, that would be the heartbreak. Instead, she performed the ultimate magic trick. She took the pain of clinical depression, the exhaustion of burnout, and the terror of being stalked, and she processed them into a multi-million-dollar business and a legitimate acting career. She didn't fall apart, she just grew up. And growing up is the most tragic thing a relatable star can do, because it forces the audience to confront their own aging, their own shifting interests, and their own need to set boundaries. Emma Chamberlain is no longer the girl in the kitchen. She is the architect of the kitchen. She is a woman who has successfully decoupled her self-worth from the like count and replaced it with a diversified portfolio of coffee beans, couture, and cinema. Her 2024 high school diploma was the final symbolic closing of the tragic teen chapter.
Emma Chamberlain is officially a high school graduate. More than 7 years after leaving high school to focus on her YouTube career, the 23-year-old receives her diploma from Notre Dame High School in Belmont, California.
It proved that she wasn't just a byproduct of the algorithm, but a person capable of finishing what she started on her own terms. As she moves into the rest of 2026, with Forbidden Fruits in theaters and Chamberlain coffee kiosks appearing in every major hub, the silence on her YouTube channel feels less like a loss and more like a graduation. She has earned her privacy. She has paid the safety tax and the fame tax in full. The issue was only ever a perspective, a lens used by those who weren't ready to let go of the girl she used to be. But Emma? She's been gone for a long time, and honestly, she's never looked better. She isn't sad, she's just finally, blissfully off the clock. The house is quiet, not because it's empty, but because, for the first time, the girl inside doesn't feel the need to shout to prove she exists. So, are you a card-carrying member of the Chamberlain cult? Or just a witness to the evolution? If you're hooked on the espresso-fueled existentialism and the high-fashion hustle, don't ghost us. Hit subscribe and join the conversation. Are you Team Relatable Emma or Team Mogul? Let's talk in the comments. Thanks for watching.